This lecture is on the impairment of intangible assets. I don't know if we'll get through all three. Let's see how it goes. This is somewhat complicated. So for limited life intangibles, it is actually, it's not just similar, it's identical. The process is identical to that of tangible assets. If you happen to remember that for equipment, you're going to first apply what's called the recoverability test. So you come up with the sum of expected future net cash flows. If that is less than the intangible assets carrying value, it's definitely impaired. In other words, the sum of all the cash you're going to get net isn't even equal to the carrying value of the intangible. So you haven't even discounted, which would make that amount smaller. So clearly it's impaired. And this is typical, this process is typical of impairment tests generally, that they set this kind of high benchmark to determine whether it's impaired. And then secondly, you write it down to fair value, which will be lower than the thing in the first part. So, you know, even though impairment tests are asymmetric in that they get written down and they don't get written back up, this type of impairment testing that makes it a little harder to find impairment, even if fair value is lower than the carrying value, does kind of make it less frequent that you'll have the impairment. All right, so let's look at impairment of a limited life intangible. They have a drug patent with a carrying value of $4 million. You have some information. A competitor just received a patent on a drug treats the same illness. And now they calculate expected future net cash flows will fall to 3.5 million. So 3.5 million is less than the 4 million. So yes, impaired. If it's no, you don't bother with the second step, okay, with the fair value test. You don't go on. So for something to be impaired, the expected future net cash flows have to be less than the carrying value, and the fair value has to be less than the carrying value, okay? It could be the case sometimes the fair value is greater than the future net cash flows, because there's a value to taking the drug off the market to the competitor. They can jack their prices up. Anyhow, so the competitor offered 3 million. That is a fair value number. Offer price is very good evidence of a fair value. Typically, these will have to be modeled. And in practice, I think, as I've mentioned in another lecture, this number and this number, that's kind of where the hard work is actually done. Okay, so valuation and estimates is really is challenging. Okay, carrying value less the fair value, so the difference is $1 million. So the new book value will be the fair value. The change is what's recorded in the journal entries. So remember, journal entries record changes in value. So you have $1 million loss on impairment, and you reduce the patent by $1 million. Okay, so just to point out, patent originally $4 million. You post the credit of $1 million, and you end up with a $3 million book value afterwards. So you may get a question, what's the loss on impairment? Here it's $1 million. What's the book value of the patent after the impairment? The answer to that is $3 million. So don't get your balances and your losses confused. All right, I'm going to stop this here and put the next example in another video.